Welcome to Iowa Pagan News, your informative internet radio station catering to all pagans worldwide. We are dedicated to bringing you the very best in music, news, events, and lots of fun stuff. Come tune into our new podcast at www.plrdn.podbean.com. Now, here is your host, Lou Silverwolf Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network. And as always, I have to say a big thank you to my good friend Virginia Ackley, who's been so kind enough to do our intros for us here at IAPN Radio. And this afternoon, I am talking with a special guest. I know I'm going to wind up probably having a hard time with your first name, but it's Enfys, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you, dear. Appreciate that. This book, I had come across Enfys on her session at Llewellyn Con, and she was talking about her new book, The Queer Kabbalah, and it's something that I felt that I really needed to bring more attention to and wanted to have her appear on the show. So thank you for taking time out.
Thanks so much. By the way, I use they, them pronouns, not she, her.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what was the primary inspiration for your book?
I got interested in learning Qabala about a decade ago. My tradition, the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel, uses Hermetic Qabala in a lot of our rituals, a lot of our magical structures, as it were. And I wanted to learn how it worked. So I started reading, and I just kept reading and learning and teaching. But the more I read, the more I got a little bit frustrated at the same time, because a lot of the books on Qabala are very dense and complicated. And they're like, welcome to this new tool. Please memorize all these correspondence charts immediately, which is not the friendliest way to try to learn anything.
No.
So yeah, it wasn't very fun. And so not only did I see there being a need for a friendlier introduction to Qabala, but also as a non-binary person, I was able to find a lot of authenticity in Qabala as a spiritual practice for me as a queer person. And I didn't see anyone else talking about that much. I know I'm not the only one to think of this, but I couldn't find anything online. I couldn't find any books about it. And so I started blogging about it. And eventually that blog became a book.
Very interesting. Yes, I do know that for anyone who has been reading, studying the Qabala, that yes, that's one of the more difficult ones to really try to fully understand, because to me, they've put so much into it that it does confuse the regular person.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlays in it too, and there's one branch that more Christianizes it, and that got kind of lumped in with the Hermetic side in ways that maybe a lot of modern pagans aren't super comfortable with, like, looking at angels and archangels. That may not be part of your practice, but it's taught as like a fundamental aspect of the tree of life. But I think there are other ways one can approach it. So I was really excited to start exploring more on my own and then sharing with others what I found to be really exciting about studying Qabala and the tree of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as everybody knows that they've made the explanation of the tree of life simplified so that everybody can understand it. But when you're going and mixing hermetics, you're mixing a lot of different aspects into this. The only thing that I can really give to people is to take what's relevant for you and just do away with the rest of it. That's the old adage that I go by anyway. But it's nice that you've taken the Qabala and made it in a way that people have a better understanding.
Yeah, I mean, and to tag on with your point, it's a little bit like that metaphor of several blind people trying to describe an elephant, and they're each touching a different part of the elephant and saying, oh, it's like this, but that doesn't ring true for other people. I think Kabbalah is much bigger than can fit in any one person's brain. So it's okay to have a partial or beginner understanding of it. It's okay if there are parts that you just don't use as much in your practice. I think it's important to attempt to understand as much as you can, including the history of it as a Jewish mystical tool, but also, find a way that it resonates for you in particular.
Excellent. Now, what has been your spiritual upbringing?
I was raised Catholic, and around age 12, I started having a lot more questions than my Sunday school teachers were really comfortable with. And I ended up having a lot of really interesting conversations with my dad, who left the church when I was 6 and had been exploring more esoteric kind of new age paths. So he and I used to have very interesting conversations about things like, what is the meaning of life? What's the nature of the soul? And I kind of settled into a place where I felt like I was agnostic for a while. I dabbled in Wicca briefly in my college years. I had my college girlfriend was like really into it, and I was like, okay, let's try this. But when that relationship ended, so did my best outlet for trying to discover more about it. So I kind of put that on the back burner until I was in my early 30s, and suddenly the calls I was receiving could no longer be ignored, as it were. I was definitely drawn toward a more esoteric path, and it kind of knocked on my brain until I said, fine, come in, let's talk. And so, yeah, I started practicing paganism, specifically sort of a blend of Wicca and ceremonial magic around 2012.
Nice. Now, I'm I've got I don't have a copy of your book here with me because Marcus has not sent it out to me yet,
Oh,
but
no.
I'm
He's
sure.
usually so on the ball.
Yeah, I know. I've been after him about that. And so basically, I'm sharing the screen here with the book, and this is basically the way that it's described is branch out from antiquated interpretations of the tree of life. And basically, the way that they've got described here is a rich framework for understanding and understanding ourselves, uh, our magical workings, and the universe. And which I don't see a lot of people really doing these days. So, I mean, it's nice that you've been able to do this for people.
Thanks. I found it really rewarding. I think we learn the best when we're teaching others. So, having the opportunity to really think through and sort of acid test the things I'd been working on and see, okay, does this make sense? And would this make sense? If I read this, does it make sense? If, my friend reads it, does it make sense to them? It really helps fine tune and sort of hone your perspective, which is a really good exercise, I think.
Mm-hmm. So now, the way that you've got yours written out, uh, did you mean it to be for uh, the everyday person to try to help teach them and give them a better understanding?
Yeah, I wanted to make Kabbalah accessible to folks who were in no way familiar with it. I think it's beneficial for people reading my book if they have some grounding in general, like paganism, a little bit of Wicca, because that is a lot of my background and the perspective I'm teaching from.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not strictly required. I think people could get something out of the book, even if they're brand new to all of it. Um, it's just really useful to have a little bit of grounding in most things. But I try to make sure it's accessible for a wide range of folks. And of my beta readers, I made sure I had one person who knew basically nothing about Kabbalah as one of my beta readers, one person who knew some stuff, and one person who'd been studying it for 30, 40 years. So that was a really good way I could tell, okay, am I making sense? Is this accessible? Is this helpful?
Oh, good. At least you had 3 key points to review and to give their honest opinion about it. I mean, most people don't get that opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, with me, I gotta admit that I don't know a lot about hermetics, and so everything that I am able to learn is something that I take value in because it gives me a chance to expand my knowledge.
Yeah. I'm generally a big fan of learning and books sort of in general. My last name may be some indication of that. Yeah, I've always been a very curious person, and
Hmm.
I've always been very intrigued by philosophy, theology, how do we make a meaningful life for ourselves? All those things kind of brought me up to this point and are probably going to continue pushing me in various directions throughout the rest of my life.
Nice. So now, is this the first book that you've written, or have you written others?
It's the first book I've written, yeah. I majored in English with a writing emphasis in college, and in fact, I went, to college not too far from, I think, where you're based, up in St. Paul, Minnesota. I went to the University of St. Thomas, and I majored in English with a writing emphasis, and basically, anyone with an English major always has that idea they're gonna write the great American novel at some point, and I think I have a third of a not great novel in a drawer somewhere from maybe my mid-20s, but I always got stuck on there's not one thing I feel passionate about or one story I'm just burning to tell to actually sit down and do the work of writing a book until I started looking at Kabbalah. And even then, I was like, I don't know if I have anything to add to this conversation. And still, until I started looking at it and realizing, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that's very intrinsically queer. And I'm
Mhm.
surprised there isn't more about that out there. So once I started digging into that, I just kept finding more and more and seeing, wow, this is a really authentic spiritual tool for folks who are outside heteronormative, cisgender kind of perspectives.
Mhm. And the thing is, we don't have a lot of authors who are touching on uh, these these areas, and so that was another reason why I wanted to invite you on here so that we can get a brand new perspective uh, on not only the book but for you as a person and trying to help teach others uh, about your path.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I stand on the shoulders of giants, really. A lot of different work has gone into influencing my particular book. Misha Magdalen's Outside the Charmed Circle, which came out in 2020, was really quite foundational alongside the book Queer Magic Power Beyond Boundaries, which is a compilation of various essays and interviews and artwork compiled by Lee Harrington and Ty Phoenix Calliston. That
Hmm.
came out in 2020 as well. I think maybe 2019, maybe 2018 now that I'm thinking of it, but not too long ago. Those two books really helped me come into great focus on my subject matter and provide that really helpful magical queerness foundation. And since then, of course, there's been also fantastic books. Cassandra Snow wrote Queering the Tarot and Queering Your Craft. And if we go back further, one I haven't had a chance to read yet is Christopher Penczak's Gay Witchcraft from 2003.
Okay, now that okay, I'm gonna have to explore that one as well. I was not, I did not know that he had written that.
Yeah, quite a while ago, and also, just came out this, I think, last month. Storm Fairy-Wolf wrote The Satyr's Kiss, which is a book about queerness and magic specifically aimed at, men and queer men, and it's just calling to me from my bookshelf. I'm super excited to read it, and I just haven't had the time yet, so I'm really excited that that one's out there as well.
Now, I think the reason why there are so many books uh, in the pagan community touching upon this is that the community itself has been always about being welcome to people of all walks, and that I mean, it can be for practically anybody, including the queer folk, LGBTQ, um, pretty much anybody on any spiritual path.
Yeah, and I think it is really notable that paganism and magical spiritual paths tend to call people who are on the margins of society and people who've been marginalized by society at large, whether that's people of color, people of different, you know, backgrounds, different countries they come from, uh, all of that. Really, we want to bring people together, people of differing physical abilities too.
Mm.
But the tricky part is that a lot of us come from, or have spent enough time in our culture, usually like Western culture in America. So we kind of keep doing things the way we're used to seeing them done, which sometimes alienates people. For example, in Wicca, there's a really heavy emphasis on masculine and feminine energy and how they combine to form magic, what I call the IKEA tab A into slot B, boom, you get magic method. And trying to come into that as someone who doesn't live in a binary context, whose gender defies being described as masculine or feminine, that can be kind of alienating. And
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a slap in the face, frankly, when someone from the margins of society comes into paganism like, wow, I finally found my people. And they're like, yes, now do things exactly the way they do in the overculture that rejected you. That's not really the best way to go.
No,
And I would love
it
to see,
isn't.
yeah, and it's not just about identity, it's things like childcare needs and financial needs and transportation needs and making our rituals accessible through a lot of different means. It's one of the little benefits we've gotten from the pandemic is a lot of us have learned how to use Zoom for ritual, which makes it accessible for a lot of different people. All you need is a phone. You don't have to even, have a computer, like a desktop computer to make that work, and you can dial in from anywhere. So
That's
I
true.
love the strides being made in terms of making our rituals and our work more inclusive. I think we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, we sure do. In fact, um, and yeah, it is because of the pandemic that it has expanded our ability to connect. Um, but I think that people are still desiring to have that actual face to face connection. And a lot of people, that's one thing that I've been hearing from a lot of people in the community, that they're getting bored with the virtual connections, that
Yeah.
they long to have that the actual face to face contact and be with people instead of being alone online.
Yeah, being a face on a screen and having to look straight in the camera for a long time, that
Mm.
can be difficult for neurodivergent people. It can be difficult for people depending on their physical and mental abilities as well. I think it is a tough thing to do. It's like, how can we make stuff more accessible, but also keep the meaning and also keep, bring back those, the physical in person stuff that a lot of people crave and a lot of people miss. So, for example, what my coven, the Fellowship of the Ancient White Stag, has done is that we have moved to having our rituals in person only, but are putting all of our classes are online only. So if you want to come to one of our classes, which we offer a few different ones a year from different guest speakers on various topics, we invite people to participate through Zoom, and it's not limited to just our coven. We open that to the public.
And that's also a good idea to do, because you've got the best of both worlds. You're holding your rituals in person, but you're doing your classes online. So
Yeah.
it is opening up to others, to
And
where I've seen some covens who won't they can't even consider even doing something like that.
yeah. And I think It's broken some boundaries and hopefully opened up ways for some spiritual groups may want to continue exclusively online and just make that available for people who need that. And then there are spiritual groups that may do less of that, but it's about finding what works for you personally. And luckily, there's a lot of options out there.
Right. So now, with the path that you're on and being a voice for our queer folk in the pagan community, what would you say is your primary focus?
I think just in general in my life, my path, and what I'm teaching, what I'm writing about, the focus is authenticity. How do you take something that's meaningful to you? How do you take what you already have and give it more meaning? How do you look at who you are and the layers you have built on top to survive in this bizarre society we have and strip out the unnecessary stuff to become the you were always meant to be? All of that really feeds my journey, it feeds my teaching, and it really has a lot to do with, queering magical practice is striving toward authenticity, not only for individuals, but I think we've done some unintentional magical limitation over the years by trying to lean too hard into a binary or, heterosexual context. If you look back at, the myth cycles that we draw from, they're not all, heterosexual cisgender. Look at Loki. I mean, Loki got pregnant and gave birth to an 8-legged horse and often was found, as a woman, as gender fluid. Odin dressed in drag a fair bit to do save. So we have, and just those are only a couple of examples. I mean, the Greeks also have tons of things. I mean, Zeus transformed into a swan, for goodness sakes. That's not even, a gender thing. But I think by making people believe, oh, well, we're making it extra special and we're having to do this burden to make our stuff more queer accessible, I would argue it's actually making your magic more authentic and deepening your connection by opening your viewpoint to how much gray area there is within the myth cycles, within the spiritual tools, within our rituals. There's more than what you can understand and explain with something very pithy and simple.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that with the way things are today, that with the writings, the teachings, the books that are out that focus on queer folk, cisgender, whatnot, that it can do away with the old argument of Wicca was meant for the feminine only?
Oh, yeah. I would definitely agree that there's much more to explore there. There is divine masculine, there is divine feminine, there's divine both and neither.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are different covens and different traditions with different outlooks on that. And for some people who are raised in a very patriarchal religion, like, say, Catholicism, like I was, there is that initial wow feeling of exploring the divine feminine, which was always, diminished and minimized, throughout our upbringing. So there's a course correction there. It's like, okay, I'm excited to finally explore this other side, which was not available to me before. For me, though, there's a balance in between those things that you can honor the divine feminine, the divine masculine, the divine both and neither, and not necessarily have to make one of those greater or lesser than the others.
No, I would definitely have to agree there, because the one thing that I've always said, that in order for this to work, there has to be a balance.
Yeah, balance in all things, and that's something reflected on the Tree of Life as well.
Mm-hmm.
There is the center point of balance in Tiferet is something I find incredibly inspirational. Not only just as a concept of, how do we balance life? That's work-life balance. How often do you hear that? I mean, constantly, right? But also, how do we balance what we're taking into our lives, what we feed ourselves, not only with food, but information. How do we balance, our understanding of how things work, learning more, trying new things, but also figuring out what works and doing that more. What I really like about that is, especially in Tiferet, it's not only about balance, but it's about honesty. It's about, the word integrity, which can mean not only wholeness or rightness, but it also means honesty. And how do we incorporate that into our lives in a way that is supportive and upbuilding and not cruel? Because there's always those people like, well, I'm just being honest. And it's like, no, you're just being a jerk. There's a difference, of course.
Yeah, there is. So now, what has been the reception of your book?
Generally extremely positive. I have heard from people from a wide variety of spiritual paths and experience say that they've found meaning in it. In particular, I am kind of a rare breed in that I really think the Kabbalah is neat, and I geek out about it and I groove on it. Even within my own tradition, which does a lot with Kabbalah, people only sort of begrudgingly study it because it is so complicated. But even outside of my magical community, I have friends who want to support me, who want to read the book. And they're like, I had no idea about any of this. And the way you talk about it is really interesting. And I'm actually able to get something out of it. And I have friends who are doing the exercises in the books and finding them useful. So that's been pretty awesome.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. I know that you had recently posted up a picture that your book is on display at the public library.
Yep, my local public library where I grew up. That was just an awesome moment for me.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, Llewellyn has ordered a second printing of it already, which is pretty fantastic. That means it's doing better than expected.
Well, I'm glad to hear that as well. You're doing something right when they've ordered up a second release of it. So. Yep.
They need to make more books, so they're going to make more books, which is great.
And plus, you also know that you must be doing something right, especially when, because I know that there's going to be the negative input from it, but the way I look at it is like, you're doing something right when you piss somebody off.
There is definitely no pleasing everybody, that's for sure.
That's true. Okay, now we're going to take a quick time out for station break and a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to be right back with more from Enfys and her book, The Queer Kabbalah. So, we're going to be right back right after this and I know that I still got to get used to the your terms that you're using. So
think of me as a swarm of bees. That helps.
Yeah. There we go. So be sure to check out Enfys' book, The Queer Kabbalah. It is on Llewellyn. So stay put. We're going to be right back.
I just walked into this coffee shop. You'll never guess what I found. All the help is deeply engrossed in metaphysical times. You should too. I'm at the Egyptian, 475 Park Avenue in Idaho Falls, Idaho. You get your very own coffee for free, and we're open till 10.
Sister Moon, Apothecary and More is a collaboration of local island witches bringing you handcrafted tools for ritual, amazing apothecary, custom vinyl work, merchandise, and so much more. But we are not just an online store. We are a sisterhood, a platform, and a voice for everything that is magical. Join us for our famous Tarot Tuesdays from 11 to 4 Eastern Standard Time for a discounted reading with our amazing in-house intuitive reader and priestess, Wolf Spirit Energy, Beverly Oberlin. You can find us on Facebook at Sister Moon Store or on the web at sistermoon.shop. So fly on over and stop in for a spell.
Pagan News Radio.
You are listening to Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network and the Podbean Podcast Network.
Okay, we are back with Enfys Book talking about the Queer Kabbalah and also how it reflects upon many people's different spiritual paths, and especially when it comes to hermetics, metaphysics, the teachings of the Tree of Life, and how it can relate to a lot of different people. Um, so far, we've determined that, like I said, I'm. It bugs me that I don't have a copy here that I can look at, so you'll have to bear with me on that one. But the way that you're describing it is you've breaking it down to where people can have a better and clearer understanding of the Kabbalah instead of it coming right off the bat. Say you got to memorize all of this to be able to understand it.
Yeah, I only put a couple of charts in the books. In the book, some of the books I've read in the past have 10 or 12 of them right at the beginning. Like, you got to know what all these correspondences are. You got to know what the perfume of each sphere is. You got to know which deity it's aligned with. You got to know the choir of angels and archangel and all this and that. And it's like, how do you teach people stuff? You don't just throw information at them and expect it to stick. You have to make it interesting, tell a story, that kind of thing. So that's more the approach I took with the book was, how would I explain this to someone who had no idea what I was talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, especially when you're getting into the actual Kabbalah and the very first few pages, you get confused that, oh, heck with this. It's like, when you have a book that breaks things down to make it more simplified and to help people understand and actually enjoy wanting to learn, that's a big positive.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Jack Chanik, who wrote Qabala for Wiccans, which came out last December. Alas, a little too late for me to incorporate it in my research, but also published by Llewellyn. When I read that, I was like, holy cow, this is the book I wish I'd had when I started learning this, because Jack has a similar perspective of like, okay, don't lean too heavily on the charts. Let's help you understand what this is about. Then you can layer on charts later if that's helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
And really did a beautiful job explaining particularly the more crunchy bits that I admittedly struggled with, like how to explain the four worlds. He gave the absolute best description of that I have ever read. And it was like, oh, now I get it. So yeah, if people like my book, I highly recommend they check out Qabala for Wiccans, because it's also fantastic.
Excellent. We'll definitely have to take time out and get in contact and have that book be next discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure Jack would be happy to be on the show. He's a great interview. I've had him on my show, 4 Quick Cues.
Nice. So now, are you also doing your own podcast as well?
Yeah, so I started this show earlier this year called 4 Quick Cues Book Talk with Enfys, and it's where I interview pagan authors. It's not a podcast, it's broadcast live on Facebook, and then I post it on YouTube after the fact. But it's where I interview pagan authors, but I only ask them 4 questions, which are determined during the interview by rolling a 20-sided dice. So keeps it sort of interesting and fresh, and it's a fairly short show. It's usually only 15 minutes to a half hour. But it's been a lot of fun so far. I'm up to episode 12 now, and tomorrow night I'm interviewing Jane Meredith, who's based in Australia, and also has a Kabbalah book coming out that's phenomenal. Hers comes out next month, and it's called Falling Through the Tree of Life, Embodied Kabbalah. And I was lucky enough to read an advance copy, and it's really spectacular.
Falling Through the Tree of Life. Now, that aspect I would never have thought of.
Yeah, it's really... she takes it out of the, like, there's intellectual stuff in the book, of course, but she really guides you through like how to feel the tree of life, how to really get down into the nitty-gritty stuff in terms of an emotional level or a physical level. She has you create kind of your own art project of individual cardboard circles to represent each of the Sephiroth and decorate it based on what you understand that Sephiroth to be about. And then anywhere you go, you can create, whatever size tree of life you need to work with for a ritual. Like, you can make one really big and do a group ritual. You can make it, just a few feet by a few feet if you're working on it by yourself. And I think that's brilliant.
Excellent. Oh, that's another one that I'll have to check out as well.
Yep. Also Llewellyn. I'm sure Marcus can hook you up.
I will definitely be connect. I'm gonna have to give him a call here, probably either tomorrow or next week. Say, hey, you're slacking.
Don't be too hard on him. He's a good egg.
Yeah, I know.
For those watching at home, Marcus is my publicist and Earl's connection to Llewellyn. So,
yep, he is a good guy. I will admit. I'm glad I've got in contact with him, and so basically, I tease him all the time.
Did you get to go to Paganicon in Minneapolis in March?
Unfortunately, no, I didn't get up there this year. I have been dealing with the unfortunate side effect of the COVID shot of acquiring Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Oh, no.
So I was out of commission for quite a while. And
Goodness.
so, yeah, didn't get back the ability to walk until this past January. So
wow,
that kind of put a damper on things earlier in the year. But
yeah, understandably.
I'm definitely.
And conventions require a lot of energy. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Paganicon several times because I spent 13 years up in Minnesota between the Twin Cities and St. Cloud.
Okay. Yeah. I lived there for 25 years myself between Rochester and St. Paul.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm very well familiar with the community up there. I know I've got a lot of friends up there. So hopefully next year I'll have a chance to go up there.
Yeah, hopefully. It's where I got to meet Marcus in person. That's why I brought it up. And while I was there, I stopped at the Llewellyn offices the day before the convention and got to do a little tour. It was really fun.
Nice.
Got to meet a lot of the team. I had earrings made that look like tiny versions of my book with the cover on it and everything. And I got to show those to the artist who designed the cover. And she was just so excited. She's like, that's so cool. How do I get a pair? So yeah, there's an Etsy shop where you can just send them the Amazon listing for any book and they'll turn it into little tiny book earrings for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Etsy's a wonderful place. I have a little bit of a habit with buying a lot of stuff from local businesses because I'm like, it's good for the community. I'm not, spending money at Amazon or whatever, but right. It's also, I just really like stickers. So it's a good place to get them.
Cool. Let's see. Did you have a chance to spend time at the Eye of Horus?
I haven't yet. I think I've been there once briefly many years ago, but I did speak to their team that was there at the convention at Paganicon, and they were excited at the idea of me coming and doing an event. So sometime in the future, I hope to do that within the next year. I haven't started getting my travel tour plans yet. At this point, I only have, I have a signing in Delaware, July 9th, and then I have a signing in Massachusetts on August 20th. And that's as far as my tour planning has gotten. But I'm planning to do stops in Pittsburgh, and I do want to get out to at least the Pacific Northwest and Seattle and Portland and do some stuff. And then also hit Minneapolis because, if nothing else, it's a great way I can go for business and then see my family while I'm there and my old friends, which is always nice.
Cool. Well, to say, yeah, if you get out to the West Coast and get up towards Seattle, you'll definitely have to look up Oberon.
Okay. Yeah, Seattle's great. I love going to Seattle and Portland. I really want to go to Portland and take a picture of my book on the shelf at Powell's. That's like other dream. Oh. Powell's bookstore is like a holy place to me. It's a 5-story independent bookstore that's absolutely incredible and has used books mixed in with the new. So you can find some really old, obscure stuff there for fairly reasonable prices. There was an astrology book that got recommended to me very early on. And when I looked it up online, I couldn't find it for cheaper than $40. And it was, a paperback. And I'm like, $40 is a little much. And then I found it at Powell's for $4. And I was like, yes, score, found the thing. So, yeah.
Oh, and 5-story store like that, yeah.
And it's the size of a city block. It's not a tiny little 5-story shop. It is huge. And there's like an entire floor just for books related to music, including sheet music and music history and music analysis and all of that. The spirituality section is enormous. Like, they have huge, tall bookshelves, and there's probably a good, like, 10 of them, like, shelving units full of books on spirituality. I've never seen that many spiritual books in one place before until I saw the New Alexandrian Library out in Delaware, which is an entire library of esoteric texts.
Sounds to me like it would take at least a good few days to explore that entire shop.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, I could spend hours just in the metaphysical section, seriously.
So could I. Definitely. All right. So now, do you have anything else planned as far as projects go?
Well, I'm going to be speaking at a couple of conventions next year. And also this year, next month, I am one of the virtual speakers at the Glastonbury Goddess Conference in the UK. I have a pre-recorded 20-minute workshop that's happening there. And next year in March, I will be at Convocation in Detroit and teaching about Queer Kabbalah. And then in April, I will be at Sacred Space / Between the Worlds, which is in Baltimore, also teaching about Queer Kabbalah and facilitating a panel discussion on queerness, gender, and magic, which I'm really excited about.
Well, to say 2 events that you should look at is Witch Fest up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's actually headed up by my good friend Staran Ravenhawk.
Oh, cool.
So that's definitely one that you should look at, because I know that Star would love to have you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm open to looking at all kinds of different places. I love going to events.
Mm-hmm. The other one I would recommend would be Chicago Pagan Pride.
Interesting. Never been.
Yeah,
I do love Chicago, though. I love the pizza.
Oh, anybody loves the pizza there in Chicago. Shoot.
I mean, it's like a casserole, but I'm a fan. I love Giordano's is my usual go-to. They're very good. But actually, though, my very favorite pizza for Chicago style is in Minneapolis. There's this tiny chain called Devani's. Their Chicago style is my absolute favorite. And unfortunately, they don't exist outside of the Twin Cities. So I'm like, oh, I miss it. I'm in Maryland now. So whenever I'm in Minnesota, I have to get my Devani's fix.
Yep. I've heard of them. That's the thing that kind of sucks about when you get hooked on something that is only in one area. They're not any place else. It's like, and when you don't live there, you get a craving for it. It's like, I gotta wait. It's like,
Yeah. Yep. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of my favorite places to eat in Rochester and Minneapolis have closed since I left, so I can't get them no matter where I live, which is a small bit of consolation, but still kind of a bummer.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
But my good friends that do the Greater Chicagoland Pagan Pride, in fact, they came to me again to cover it this year.
Nice.
So they came to me and asked me to help cover it again. So it always makes me happy that I can assist my neighbors.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, in my previous career, I worked for the ELCA Lutheran Church for 6 years, the national body, and they're headquartered out of Chicago. So I used to have to fly to Chicago about every 3 weeks for work for a year or so.
nice.
Yeah, I really liked it. I like Chicago. I don't think I could live there. I'm not as big of a fan of snow, which is part of why I don't live in Minnesota anymore. And I live out in Maryland because we get very little snow and I'm good with that. But yeah, and those lake effect snows are nothing to mess with. Holy cow, it's a lot.
Yeah, I know.
I almost went to college there. I was really interested in going to Elmhurst College in Chicago and it just didn't work out. But I love kind of the whole Milwaukee, Chicago area. It's neat.
Yep. I never will forget that one winter up there. I think it was 2004. I was living in a town just right south of St. Cloud, and we got absolutely buried that one winter. That was bad. So,
we had what we call a snowpocalypse out here in 2010, which happened right as I was about to start a brand new job. and I didn't have any of my equipment or anything, and just sort of had to make do for the first week working from home without any of the things I needed to do my job. But yeah, it was interesting because I lived in a pretty, like, an inner ring suburb of DC where, there's like a 6-lane road going right through the middle of it. It's very populous and it's a major commuting hub. And you could walk right through those 6-lane streets. There was nobody on the road. It was like a zombie apocalypse for several days because they don't have the plows out here to mitigate major snowfall like they do back in the Midwest.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So when it snows, we're out of luck for a while.
Oh, man. Well, let's see. Now, I'm going to be, let's see, I've got your Facebook that I've been showing, as well as a link for your book through Llewellyn that people can go to get your book.
Slight correction to the Facebook one. I think it says Enfys Boo, and it should say Enfys Book at the end. I think you ran out of characters.
Uh-oh.
But
Okay.
just for people looking for me on Facebook, make sure it says Enfys Book and not Enfys Boo. Enfys Boo is a very cute nickname, but, it's not one I've used yet. I tell people they can call me ebook, first initial, last name. I'm
There
okay
you
with
go.
that.
There you go. Okay. And so basically what's the best way people can get in contact with you?
Really through my website and social channels, which you can go to Major Art Queerna, basically anywhere. MajorArtQueerna.com is the main website. If you can't remember that, go to QueerKabbalah.com. It'll take you there as well. Spell the Kabbalah with a Q. You can also find me at Major Art Queerna on Twitter and Instagram, and the Major Art Queerna page on Facebook. And those are the best places to find me. I do my the 4 Quick Cues interview show I mentioned on Facebook, on that Major Art Queerna Facebook page, approximately every couple of weeks. It sort of depends on when guests are available, but it starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on either a Monday or a Wednesday. This week it's on a Wednesday, so it's tomorrow. And yeah, I post everything on my website, MajorArtQueerna.com. I've got some blog posts that people have found particularly helpful that are linked on the front page. Stuff about like what to do when you mess up someone's pronouns, or like how to understand people going through a gender change late in life, things like that are a little outside the magical realm, but really useful within the queer inclusivity realm.
Yeah, I know. When it comes to using pronouns, it's like I tend to get spacey with it, and
it takes practice.
I have to really focus myself. Say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to use, so I don't mess things up.
I mess it up too, more than I'd like to admit, but I do. Everyone makes mistakes. That's part of the point. Like it's about how do you recover from that? How do you get better, and find ways to incorporate it into your understanding. And that takes time. Like those mental roads, those grooves are worn deep, and trying to get the carriage on a different track, it just takes time.
Yeah, that's true. And myself, I've always been a big supporter of the queer community. Anybody associated with the LGBTQ community has always been a big support factor from me personally.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your support.
You're very welcome. And I appreciate you for taking time out to come join me this evening.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Good. And yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and look forward to seeing more projects, and really wish you well on your travels.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Stay safe out there.
Definitely. You've been listening to another edition of Pagan Artist Spotlight on the Prairie Land Radio Network and Iowa Pagan News. It's always a pleasure to have everyone tuning in as usual. And something that I want to really convey to everybody, if you'd like to help support us here at IAPN Radio, we have PayPal link at Iowa Pagan News at Gmail. We have a Cash App that people can use to donate directly, so that we can keep the lights on, we can keep these programs going for everybody, and so we can keep up the content and bring information to everybody, because that's what our main focus is. So if you want to support us, that's the best way to do it. And if you have questions for me later on, please email me directly at earl@iapnradio.net or else at iowapagannews@gmail. So with that, I am going to say pleasant journeys, and I'll be back same bat time, same bat channel with another interview scheduled for tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And so be sure to tune in then, and keep everyone around you safe, keep your family safe, and if you're going to be outside, make sure you hydrate. Because with the weather we've got right now, it's a good idea. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. We're out of here.
Thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. All shows are recorded and available for download at plrdn.podbean.com. All rights are reserved and may not be replayed without written permission by IAPN Radio Management. Come join us at our new group, IAPN Radio on Facebook, where you can be kept up to date for future broadcasts. Pleasant journeys, everyone.